Now let's have a look at some recent trends in international migration. This map shows the share of emigrants as a percentage of total population of country of origin in the year 2015. On this map you can see which countries are those countries who are losing relatively high percentages of their population due to migration. And it's those countries who are in relatively dark red who are losing the most people from their population because people are moving to other countries. On this map you can clearly see that it's the poorest countries or countries where there are major conflicts which have the highest shares of immigrants. If we look at Northern and Southern America, we can see, for example, that Mexico and a couple of other Southern American countries like Peru and Bolivia, for example, has high share of immigrants. Those migrants, those immigrants tend to migrate further to Northern America, to the United States and to Canada, because there are better job markets in the United States and in Canada. People are seeking higher living standards. People are trying to improve their economic situation by moving to the United States and to Canada. As you know, there is some conflict in terms of illegal and undocumented migration. Some of the migrants coming into the United States are actually undocumented migrants. They are not entering the country in a legal way, but rather undocumented, crossing the border and still being employed in the United States, but without a working permit. In Europe, you can see a very interesting divide between Western and Eastern Europe. You can see that compared to Western Europe, Eastern European countries have a relatively high share of immigrants. That is because Western Europe is more developed than Eastern Europe. And because of the European Union, there's a freedom of movement between countries inside of the European Union. That is, people inside the European Union can legally migrate to other countries inside the European Union to find work and to live there permanently. Because of that, a relatively high share of people in Eastern European countries decide to move to Western Europe to find better paid jobs, to improve their economic situation, to have a higher standard of living. You can also see, when looking at the Middle East and some African countries, that there are a couple of countries there with high shares of immigrants. Those are, for example, countries where there are serious conflicts, such as Syria and Somalia. So these countries are losing high shares of their population because there are many refugees fleeing from war and serious conflict and violence. Also, a couple of African countries are losing high shares of their population simply because of the very low level of development, and people are trying to move to other countries, to the north, mainly to European countries. Now let's have a look at Southeast Asia. And here you can see Thailand, which is displayed in white, which means that Thailand has a very low share of immigrants. That is, very few Thai people leave their country to live in other countries. Whereas the neighboring countries of Thailand have higher shares of immigrants, because a relatively high share of people living in Myanmar, in Laos and Cambodia, the neighboring countries of Thailand, are coming to Thailand to live and work in Thailand, because there is a shortage of labor in Thailand, especially in the service sector and the construction sector, for example. So people from those countries come to Thailand and they find better paid jobs in Thailand, and they are able to improve their own living standards while also helping Thailand to address its own shortage of labor. Now let's have a look at another map. This map shows the share of immigrants as a percentage of total population of country of destination in the year 2015. So on this map you can see those countries which are major receiving countries of migrants. Those are the most popular countries to which migrants move. In Northern and Southern America, it's clearly Canada and the United States who are the most attractive countries because they are the two most developed countries in Northern and Southern America. So it's especially people coming from Southern America who are migrating to Northern America, but also people from other parts of the world. As you know, the United States is a traditional host country for migrants. The United States have the so-called green card program. So every year the United States is accepting migrants from all over the world. But there's also some degree of undocumented migration, as I mentioned before. So some of the immigrants coming to the United States are undocumented migrants. You can see now as well here, opposite to what we saw on the previous map, that it's the Western European countries who have relatively high share of immigrants because the Western European countries are receiving migrants from Eastern Europe, from Africa, but also from some Asian countries. In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and some other countries on the Arabian Peninsula are major receiving countries. That is in part due to the serious conflicts in some other countries like Syria. If you look at Syria, Syria is white, which means that Syria has a very low share of immigrants, which is not surprising because there is war in Syria, so very little people would actually decide to move to Syria. It's rather the opposite way around. And if you look at some of the neighboring countries of Syria, like Jordan and Saudi Arabia, those countries are receiving many of the refugees who are fleeing the war in Syria. And in Southeast Asia, you can also see the opposite that we saw before. Here, Thailand is displayed in a slight red, whereas its neighboring countries are displayed in white. So Thailand, inside Southeast Asia, clearly is the only country with some considerable share of immigrants as a percentage of its own population. Other countries in the world who have high percentages of immigrants are Australia and New Zealand, as you can see. Again, two relatively high developed countries. Russia, but also, interestingly, Greenland.